All right. I'm thinking we are live. Hold on a second. Let me. All right. We are live. So I am going to bring this up on my phone too so that I can see when people get here.
Ah, cool.
Oh, oh. So, all right, guys, anybody that gets here before I get finished with this, just make sure you say hello in the comments so that we know you're here. And I'm super excited about this. So, you're here. Hold on. Super excited. There we go. All right, so it looks like we've got Sean here and Wendy. So thank you guys for being here. This is my friend and my new friend. We haven't known each other for very long. She's in the Audience Accelerator program with me, but I was just a guest on her podcast. And hello, my Virgo friend. Hello. I forgot about that, Sean. So anyway, I was on her podcast and it's called The Hidden Gifts of Loss, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Beautiful. And the interesting thing is we had such a good time. However, my gifts of loss that we talked about was um a little bit I did cry a bit, right? And so that's to be understood. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to talk a little bit about what went on in our podcast recording, and then I'm going to introduce you to Julie. So what I want to do now is just open the floor to Julie. Julie, go ahead, and if you don't mind, share a little bit about your podcast and why you started your podcast, because it's an amazing story.
Oh, well, thank you, Vicki. So I started this podcast after my mom. Well, after my mom, to back up, about 4 years ago, my mom passed right in the middle of the pandemic from pancreatic cancer, and then a little less than a year later, my dad passed as well. And while I was going through grieving, I found that the thing that helped me the most was talking about it. But I was like, people are going to get sick of me talking about this all the time. And I thought, well, why not start a podcast? Because there's probably a lot of other people that want to talk about the same kinds of things. Well, I didn't really start the podcast until after I met Stacy Lauren and Vicki and all of these other people in Find Your Voice. And then I decided to just jump in and do it messy. And the theme of the podcast, it's grief, but not grief per se. It's the hidden gifts that unfold during and after a loss, little coincidences that you didn't expect, or ways that you grow as a person as a result of experiencing that loss, ways that your perspective changes. So and those are the stories that I just love to hear. um, so everybody deals with that in a different way.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
And everybody, there's not a soul alive that doesn't have some type of loss that they've had to go through, some
Yes.
bigger than others. But really, when you think about it, what's big to one person might not be to another. So there's really no way of judging the level of busyness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought I don't know that I came up with this term, but I call it a life altering death or a life altering loss, because everybody's going to experience it differently. Even the same loss, two different people in the same family,
Yeah.
are going to experience it differently. If it's your significant other, that's every day of your life, versus a grandparent that lives out of state. That's not going to have the same impact. So for me, my mom, that was my first life altering death, and I was in charge of taking care of her because it was during the pandemic and there was no support. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
very transformative.
Yeah, I've had Julie on my podcast too. So anybody that is interested in viewing or listening to that podcast, let me know, and I'll share the link with you. I might just share it in the group later anyway. Um, But the thing that we talked about is because she asked me, we had a conversation before, and what kind of losses have I experienced? Well, then it was like, okay, let me get the list out. And,
Yes.
but the one that seemed at the time to really be wanting to be told was about my granddaughter. And some of the people that know me know a bit of the story, but for a lot of people, they have no clue, because it's been a while, and it's not something that I talk about all the time, or at least not in depth. I may refer to it, on
Mhm.
occasion, but I don't really dive into the depth of it, because it is such a heart wrenching thing. But one of the questions that you asked me, and I can try to remember what it was, and I get confused because sometimes I've been on several podcasts since then. So if you didn't ask me this, then I'm sorry.
That's
Um,
okay.
but was it was, does the thought of that loss, does it hold you back, or does it push you forward? Did you ask me that one?
Yeah, I did something along those lines. Like,
Yeah.
did this? Was this something that propelled you towards your kind of seize the day, today's dream, tomorrow's reality, and your whole movement that you've started?
Yeah, yeah. So, just out of curiosity, as you were starting the podcast and everything,
Mhm.
did you know that that was like part of the stuff that you were going to touch on? Or is that something that just kind of came to you as you were beginning to do all this?
That was something, yeah, that I had thought I wanted to touch on
Yeah.
because, like, I was surprised at all these steps I kind of started taking, things that I had held back on, starting
Hmm.
this podcast. I'm writing a memoir of the same title, Hidden Gifts of Loss. And yeah, so I held myself back. But then after you go through something, you realize tomorrow is not promised. And,
Yeah,
seize the day,
that's right.
we don't know what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah. And Wendy just put in here that pain helps you heal. And that's true, but sometimes it's a long journey,
Mhm.
of healing. And I think um, one of the things that really came up for me, especially as we were talking on the podcast, and it's not like I hadn't never thought of it before, but for some reason it just really came to my mind in a brighter level or whatever, was that you know even though that whole thing with my granddaughter was heart-wrenching, and it definitely didn't turn out the way I'd expected it to, or I wanted it to, none of that, right?
Mhm.
But in looking back, it was one of the best things that I experienced,
Mhm.
because it was such an amazing, joyful time right
Mhm.
before she was born. And then after she was born, things just went to a totally different level. And then there was excitement, and there was, a life altering event with that one. Right. And
Definitely.
so there was so much that went on. And I know now, I can't say without a doubt, but I know that the fact that I had her is the only reason she survived. And so, I feel like every day that I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to, you know, help her live.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot that I share in the podcast. So if you want to hear it, you got to get the podcast. And so what we're going to do is, if you want to, you can, if you want the recording um, sent to you early, you can put the word link in the comments, and that goes anybody that's watching the replay, because it's going to be a few days before she's actually got it out and everything. And so if you're watching the recording and you want the link to watch this podcast and get a little taste of the way Julie talks to all of the people that come on her podcast, and you will not be disappointed. It's really, really nice. But definitely, okay, Wendy says she wants the link. And so what we're going to do is, Julie is actually in our group, in our stand up and stand out group. And so she'll be able, Heather Mullen, I didn't even realize you were here, Heather,
Mhm.
somehow. So anyway, Heather wants the link too.
Great.
Um, but she will kind of come back in and look to see who wants the link, and then she can actually send it out. So you will get first dibs on the link, so that you'll get to watch it before she actually has it completely out, published everywhere it's going to be. And I don't even know where all that is. So do you want to touch on that? Where all will it be?
It's only on Spotify right now.
Okay.
You know, I'm still in the newbie stages of doing the podcast, but so I eventually, yes, will push it out to the other platforms. But right now, it's just on Spotify.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. So, and this is actually streaming on YouTube as well. And I know Sean said he couldn't share this out, and that's because this is a private group. But if you're watching on YouTube and you want to share this out, you can share it out to someone else. Whether you're watching live now or you're watching the replay later, you can share it from the YouTube platform. And actually, Julie, this is her first time to actually be going live in a group. So I'm so excited to have her here and give her first taste of going live. And so quite painless, don't you think?
Yes, it's quite painless. You really can't tell that you're even live, right? It's like you said, Vicki, we're just sitting on your couch having a conversation, you know?
Yep. And of course, I have my cup of tea.
Yep.
I have to have my tea every time.
I've got my water.
For some reason, it's like I feel like I've got things staged. So when I go live, or especially like when I'm doing a podcast, and since that's my frame of reference, is we're sitting on the sofa getting to know each other, I have to have my tea because it just kind of like it anchors it all in, right?
It grounds you, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So what is?
Go ahead. Well, I was going to mention that I also have a Facebook community called The Hidden Gifts of Loss, and
okay.
I am very interested in hearing people's stories of loss and transformation, and not only death. It can be different kinds of loss, like Vicki lost, your granddaughter, not to death, but in a different way. It could be a pet, it could be a relationship, but I like those stories. I think they need to be told and shared.
Yeah.
So you can check out my Hidden Gifts of Loss Facebook community. And
so how did they find it?
I guess we can put a link in Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
In your community, we'll put a link to my community, and then when you join, it's just like Vicki's, there'll be a couple little questions to answer, but then we can connect. And if you would like to share your story as well, then we can set that up.
Yeah. So since you started your podcast and your Facebook group and everything, what has been your favorite thing that has come out of that?
It's been the response from people who have come on the podcast and thanked me for getting to tell their story. One woman, Darcy Volden, she's part of this whole community too.
She's been on my podcast too.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She had never told the entire story, start to finish, of the loss of her ex-husband, Jeff. And she has thanked me multiple times that she was so grateful she got to tell that story.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And several people have not ever told the whole story.
Yeah.
That has been a huge hidden gift to me, that's what I wanted. I wanted to provide that space. And then when you get that feedback that, yes, you did provide that space for me, it's very rewarding.
And Wendy just shares that her grief is that she had a mastectomy. And so that's a great loss too with Grief Connections. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then Heather says grief of a body and mind lost from cancer or another disease. So Heather had cancer. And so she's got, everybody's got a story, right?
Absolutely.
And the ones that I really love diving into, because all of my people it's their stories too. It's not necessarily about grief, but there's always something, that's gone wrong, and there's grief of that. And then you got to move on. And then you come out on the other side with like, oh, wow, that was that I can find the gifts in those things that happened to me, no matter how bad it was or the lesson. Sometimes finding a gift is a little harder. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just the lesson or a connection that you came to because of it. Right. Mm-hmm. So I really love those. Let's see. Wendy says many breast cancer survivors have a hard time. Yes, yes, they do.
Mm.
Yeah. So definitely, and amputees, yes. And one of my first podcast, it doesn't show that way now, because they had a snafu and all the episodes got mixed up. So my first episode is not actually my first episode, but my first one was actually a gentleman that had diabetes, and because of his diabetes, he had his leg amputated up to the knee,
Wow.
or it might have been, I think, up to the knee. But anyway, he talks a lot about his story and how all that happened. But then one of the things that he said that really compelled me to keep going, and this
Mhm.
was my first episode, right? And he said that the losing his leg was the best thing that had ever happened to him,
Wow.
because he said he took um, uh, suddenly was taking care of his body and his health and his mind, but it also put him on this trajectory of coaching other people that were having issues. And he said that, it was an amazing, a lot hard, life-changing thing, but he said he's so very grateful that it happened.
Mm.
And so, there's a lot comes out of that. And Wendy says loss of sight or hearing too. Yes, there's a lot of it out there. The thing that is important is that we can find, like Julie's podcast, we can find the hidden gifts in that loss. We don't stay stuck in the grief and the despair of the loss. We can find a hidden gift in there, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
When you look back, it's like, this is something I had to go through to get here. And I never would have seen it that way when I was in it.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So when you're thinking about with all the stuff that happened with your mom and all, is did it take you a while to find those hidden gifts of loss? Is that why that's part of the title of everything, is because you want people to get to that place faster?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get there faster, that's good. I know for me, it was a very hard year of like intense grief. And I'm not someone who cries easily. And that year it was just, anything, music, anything could just trigger that. And I would just kind of be a puddle, on the floor. But
Mhm.
but I think one of the things that helped was actually not fighting it, like just
Yeah,
giving into that grief whenever it would surface. Because I think that's one of the ways that we can get stuck, is resisting it, or pushing it down when it comes up and we don't want to feel those feelings. So for
yeah.
whatever reason, and one of the things that helped me, and I'm going to have this woman on my podcast too. She was an end of life doula. Her name is Roxanne, and part of her training was to 1 hour per week for 12 weeks. She would just listen to me, and I would just tell these stories about my mom, and she would just validate how I felt and encourage me. And she was one of the first people that really encouraged me to tell my stories about my mom, because there was a lot of just funny stuff, seemingly coincidental stuff, just it was a very surreal experience. And so because of her encouragement and just her listening, I was
Yeah.
able, I feel like, to move through that grief. I don't know if I would call a year fast, but yeah, I think relatively.
Well,
Yeah.
it is, because some people stay in that grief stage for years, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and the thing too is that, as you were saying, that is one of the books that I reference to a lot of times, is that Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And so if we're not, if you've never read it, it's a great book.
Yeah.
But it's when we have anything, whether it's a loss of a job or any of that stuff, anything that comes up that's very emotional, and if we don't give ourselves the ability to let it out and move through it, it's not so much that you're letting it out as you're moving through it. It's like there's this fog in front of you, and you
Mhm.
can't go over it and around it. You got to go through it.
Yes.
And but you can run faster as you're going through, or you can go slow. Everybody has their own pace. But the thing is that if you don't, that's when all these things will show up in your body, because our body keeps score. That's another book, The Body
Yeah.
Keeps Score,
Mhm.
of what's going on, and we can actually manifest all kinds of things in our own body from the things that we don't deal with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. and even kind of succumb to self-destructive behaviors, if you're
Yeah.
trying to avoid it, you name it, drinking, whatever,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had an amazing time on your podcast. I will say that. You may be a newbie, but you're very good at it.
Thank you.
And so it was very pleasant. I enjoyed it. And so I don't want to say too much about what all of it was, but it was there one thing that when we were having our conversation, was there one thing that I might have said, because like I don't even remember a doggone word I said, that you would want to share with people to let them say, hey, I got to go watch this.
Well,
I'm putting you on the spot because I don't
Okay.
got a clue.
So, I when we were talking about the hidden gifts near the end of the podcast, and I was really struck and really moved by, as heart-wrenching as this story was, that you said, how is it that I was so blessed, that God
Mhm.
blessed me so much that I got to have this experience? Because there's a lot of ways you could go with what you went through. You could be bitter, you could shut down, but you recognized it for the gift that it was, and the way that you just hold it in your heart, and send that love and light to your granddaughter. I just really thought that was beautiful. And the weirdest thing, I don't know if it's the weirdest thing, but I've had this feeling the last few days since we did the episode that I watched a movie, and then I'll be like, no, that was real. That really happened to Vicky. That really happened to that little girl. I did not see a Lifetime movie. But it absolutely certainly could be. That
Yeah.
was just, and it's not an isolated thing that happens, unfortunately, in our
Yeah.
in our world and in our court systems and whatnot, by people who maybe are well intentioned. I don't know, but
Yeah.
and I found myself wishing that there was something that I could do to help, and to help other people who might be going through it. And but I think the only thing that I can do in this moment is have people like you come on my podcast and share these stories, so that maybe other people, won't feel as alone if they're going
Yeah.
through something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right. So we're getting close to time. We didn't want to be on here too long for you guys, but um does I don't know who all's still here. I think Sean said that he had to go. But do you ladies have any questions or anything that you want to ask Julie? So I'll wait a second because there's a delay from what we're doing and what's happening here.
All this tech.
I know that's why I love. If I had my other phone in here, I would be playing the Jeopardy music. I try to do that every now and then, but then it seems like every time. All right. So Wendy, do you have any questions or anything for Julie? So let's see if there's. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I'm too many places to look.
Right.
All right. So Wendy says she doesn't really have any questions. Heather, are you talking about slots? Do you mean, are you asking about getting a time on her podcast? That's not what we're asking. I'm just asking if you have any questions about what we've talked about today, or maybe a question about her podcast, or and she can put a link in the comments, so you can. How would they get in
I'll
connection
put a
with
link
you?
to my Facebook community.
Yeah, but what about
The
scheduling
blog.
for your podcast? How do they do that?
Well, if they come into my community, there's questions you can answer, and then you could. One of them, I think, is, "Why did you join this group?" And you could say,
Okay.
"Because I heard you on Vicky's podcast, and I'm interested in being a guest."
Okay. Yeah. So we will, after we get off here, we will put a link so you can go in and join her group. And then from there, you can let her know that you came from here, and she can reach out, or
Yeah,
however,
reach out and
and get you scheduled, because it's definitely worth doing. And I know, Heather, you got a lot to do, and we're going to be doing your podcast pretty soon. I don't remember the date, but I have Heather down, I think. Well, I don't see it over there, but it's all going to be great, and it's just it was so freeing and so powerful because I don't often the 31st. Okay. All right. Now I see it.
You are quite the popular podcast, Vicki.
But it's being able to tell your story is so freeing. And so I know, Heather, you're going to be on my podcast telling your story. And then if you feel comfortable and you want to go ahead and get on Julie's podcast, then I'm sure she would love to have you. And that goes for you too, Wendy, because Wendy's been on my podcast. She's got a lot of amazing things to say. She's wonderful. Actually, I met Wendy in Melissa's group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Melissa, the cruise.
Yes. That's where I met her. Yeah. Nice. So we all help each other in this amazing community. And so, all right, you guys, it was amazing to have you here. And so far, we've got a few links in the comments that we will make sure that she has your information so that she can send you the link as soon as it's up and ready. Yes. And Wendy says thanks.
Yes.
So thank you, Julie, for being here. And I was just excited to share this podcast out because not only is Julie amazing, but it's a part of my story that we're sharing. And so I'm always open to sharing my story out a little bit more so people know me better. And I don't know that they really know me better from it, but however.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah. And then Heather says, thank you so much. And so you guys, as soon as we get off here, we will put the link in the comments, and then you can go ahead and join her group and get scheduled for a podcast if that's what you want to do. All right. So thank you, ladies. And tomorrow is Sunday. So I will see you at 10 a.m. Eastern. And if you can be there. And I know, Wendy, you'll show up a little bit late because you got church, but it's all good. I'll see you when I see you, right? All right. Bye.
Oh, thank you.